Good morning, friends of the Norman Finkelstein group and Facebook, which is a group, as the title suggests, focused on justice for Arab people who have been displaced, most notably the people of Palestine, um, and generally focused on the problems of the fascistic West, most notably its ringleader, the fascist United States, and generally the concerns of the downtrodden. And so not just focused on, say, the life of Mr. Finkelstein, um, as interesting as his life is, or the writings of Mr. Finkelstein, as worthwhile as they are. You can see some of his books. You can support him by purchasing his books. If you don't have access to that, you can also read many of his books by going to the anti-imperialist playlist of audiobooks that I share quite frequently in these conversations. A number of them are on that 400 book list of anti-imperialist audiobooks, including alongside Mr. Finkelstein's books of other very serious writers, like Edward Said, and many other um, anti-Zionist Jews and Arabs and other scholars, um, and revolutionaries like Leila Khalid, um, um, and folks like this. There was a Sinwar audiobook on that list, but it was banned from the list because apparently um, only freedom fighters do not have free speech. Only the fascists fighting against freedom fighters have free speech in the fascist West, such as YouTube controlled by Google, a military-industrial complex abomination subset. Um, and I woke in it's um, it's still in the AM. It's still relatively early on a Saturday morning, December 14th, 2024. Woke from a dream, an unsettling dream, but as I describe, a dream not unfamiliar to me. I frequently am a lucid dreamer, so scarcely a night passes where I do not dream of the capitalist climate apocalypse, the very likely near-term oblivion of humankind. I tend to visualize this specifically. It will help me to stay focused on these concerns rather than doing what quite nearly every European descended person does, pretending that this impending omnicide is not a serious concern, and thus acting quite inappropriately, supporting the institutions that are contributing to the omnicide rather than fighting to stop the extinction of humankind. And I don't dream every night of this. It wouldn't really be possible to do that, but it's that's to say, have really consistent lucid dreams of that kind. Um, but it is a frequent frequent thing, sometimes a month. Um, and I'm going to talk about the sorts of people who are on the wrong side of history, really mask off a moment in recent hours. This is a commentary that was shared by Professor Anthony Zenkus of Columbia University, a noted Marxist-Leninist writer whose analysis is generally on point. And I think the only thing I would say of Professor Zenkus that I don't wholly agree with is that he does not take the most militant of views or strategies, which in this time frame where we have uh, approximately 4 years, 2029, approximately 4 years to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse um, by transforming the industrial bases quite dramatically, such as abolishing the U.S. military industrial complex. After 2029, we'll have reached a period of human history that we could describe as runaway overheating, wherein in the years and decades to follow, inevitably, uh, this human environs that we require to live, these ecosystems, will become inhospitable to human life because of human activity. We are at this period where we could stop, if not totally reverse, stop these effects and thus avoid the death of billions. And whatever need be done must be done to see that extinction event does not occur. And so Professor Zenkus maybe has about as much in common, let's say, or not, about has as much in common perhaps with a person that I talk about quite a lot, Salvador Allende of Chile, who built this technological planned economy after coming to be the head of state of Chile through electoral means, despite being a Marxist-Leninist. So a person like Zenkus is not um, likely to run for U.S. president or become U.S. president. Unfortunately, the U.S. System is so captured by corporate interests that that would be nearly impossible. But let's not say nearly impossible. We live in a strange time. But he often talks about electoral matters on his page. Um, and every moment that you're wasting fixating on electoral politics, whatever transformation might occur in the United States because of electoral stratagems, it would not lead to the abolition of the U.S. military-industrial complex in that 4-year time frame. So anytime you're talking about, I sure do wish Democrats would get their act together, all you are really saying is that you support a kind of subterfuge of doomed reformism um, um, in place of the kind of conversation you should be having, that wherein we discuss open warfare against the fascist United States to avoid the homicide, and not merely discuss, but undertake such a thing. Um, but nevertheless, Professor Zenkus shared something which is shared from another um, user from the Prospect, Luke Goldstein, describing the governor of the state of New York holding a quote a therapy session with 175 corporate reps and CEOs to quote calm the nerves of the New York City business elite in the wake of the Brian Thompson United Healthcare CEO killing, promising quote state assistance for corporate security to combat quote domestic terrorism. Governor Karen, who a few days ago was kind of in bad faith taking credit for some small concession, the reversing of a policy of charging people for anesthesia, a ridiculous policy, which was reversed after the death of CEO Thompson. And she said she was kind of taking credit for that, but obviously, like, this is a person, Governor Karen is a person who is in the employ, bribed by those very interests, United Healthcare and for-profit death care merchants, death care profiteers like United Healthcare, or the health insurance scams or big pharma scams generally. So a person who's bribed by those people, taking credit for work done by others, people who are actually on the wrong side of history, when all of her actual work has been quite the opposite. That's of course not a problem limited to Governor Liberal Karen. It's a problem of the entire system, and this mask off moment is people of this kind, of the bourgeois and ruling elites, um, um, showing absolutely no concern for the roughly 100,000 people a year who will die because of these CEOs and corporate elites whose nerves she is trying to calm, but instead characterizing the activity to end that mass murder as domestic terrorism. And I I'm reading a book which I'll share in the comments or description, called The Red Flag. I haven't finished it yet. The red flag referring to the communist flag. The Red Flag, A History of Communism. And it's quite a lengthy book. And it describes quite a lot of Marxist-Leninist and revolutionary activity over the past century. And so part of what I was reading about was about democratic Kampuchea and and Pol Pot, and this is one of those neoconservative or CIA type talking points that you'll hear quite a lot. Well, yeah, this is what happens with communists; they turn into Pol Pot. Even communists will refer to Pol Pot. You don't want to be like that guy, right? But that analysis is so ridiculous because the circumstances that produce a person who would start out building a people's government and end up committing mass murder, those precise circumstances are only created. A thing like that only comes to pass because of the activity of the fascist United States, a killer of 300 million workers in modern times. The best way to describe that problem without breaking down those 300 million murders and their effect on the building of people's governments is to describe what happened in the Soviet Union at its inception, at the beginning of the so-called Russian Civil War. It is true that the Bolsheviks might have been removed from power at that time, that they did not have the solidest of government in 1917. However, it is also true that the whites, the forces of the Tsar, were quite decimated, and the imperial powers, the fascists of that time, the fascistic forces of that time, including the United States, which did not have this massive outsized sort of CIA-run world role on the world stage then that it does now, but nevertheless was an imperial force quite unlike any other, even in 1917. But the United States and all of the other North Atlantic imperial powers joined together to crush this first foray into state socialism, leading to this thing that led to the death of many hundreds of thousands of people in this so-called Russian Civil War. And this is of note because at no point in the history of the Soviet Union, or in the building generally of formations that would tend to support a people's government, Um, at no point has that level of pressure ever been taken off. At no point um, have has the fascist West ever not been trying to destroy these things. And so the very people who you meet who say, well, who will sneer at you and say, well, obviously socialism or communism, um, those two kinds of things never work. Why are you even talking about this? That would never work. Those are the people who are quite propagandized, right? Because they don't recognize this Voltron of imperial powers coming together to destroy state socialism. They don't recognize that phenomena, and the a feature of that CIA-run world is that there's almost incalculable amount of disinformation around these things, so that we do not really see, or the public is not really able to fully see or acknowledge the amount of mass murder, the raw tonnage of horror that the fascistic powers, particularly the anti-communist ringleader, the fascist United States. Anti-communism and fascism are the same thing. If you are anti-communist, if you are against people fighting to build a humane and sustainable economic system, a necessary precursor to building a humane and sustainable world, kind of activity which, if a great many people do not engage in that kind of activity, humanity will soon become extinct. Sometime shortly after, in historical terms, shortly after the year 2029. If you are against that, if you are against communism, my friend, you are a fascist. Those are the same thing. Fascism and that is why you can refer to a cruelty or elitism or imperialism before 1917. All of those North Atlantic powers were openly imperialist at that time. They would describe themselves happily as imperialists. Um, but after 1917, when you had the building of actual state socialism, admittedly lowest level state socialism, after that time was the time when you had formalized structures of fascism um, in response to the existence of socialism as a state formation or mass formation. Um, and this um, um, so this there's so very little that is seen by the public in this, but increasingly more. There. I just saw a video of people in a nightclub, also I believe in the Northeast. Um, could be mistaken. I'm not remembering where it was occurring at the moment. So it was a nightclub disc jockey, um, and this disc jockey was playing some music, and then did a shout out to Luigi Mangione, and the crowd went nuts. They went nuts. It was in Boston, yes. And so they put up a Luigi Mangione's mugshot, and the crowd is cheering. And this is Proud Socialist shared this. It's got some probably it's got some 30,000 or so views from just an hour, a couple of hours. Um, and the person who shared it originally, Sana Saeed, probably hundreds of thousands more. Um, class consciousness is emerging, and the ruling elites are going to be incredibly isolated by trying to stop this emergence. But this is their bread and butter. They only exist in this world to protect, that is to say, politicians um, of the fascist United States only exist in this world to protect the interests of the big bourgeois and the ruling elites. And so they'll go down with the ship, continue to protect that to their dying breath, irrespective of the outcome, rather than reverse course, because um, um, they would have no role to play and nothing protecting them, should they try to actually take the side of hundreds of millions of people over the side of a few thousand people in a world that will be dead if they do not stop doing this, and in a world where class consciousness seems to be on the rise to such a degree that it doesn't matter how many billions of dollars Project Mockingbird and garbage like this would spend on um, misinformation and dirty tricks, um, if everyone suddenly turns against them, which is, I have said this many times, it's an almost inevitability that the fascist United States will collapse. It's to say its government itself, not a statement as to the fate of the people. You are not the U.S. fucking government. The fact that so many of you think that, particularly mayonnaise, European descended fascist pigs, I think that somehow they are the U.S. fucking government. Um, um, uh, it's another absurdity, right? But the U.S. government is almost, because of this role of the fascist slash anti-communist ringleader, is also the role of protecting super polluting regime. It's the role that it actually plays in being the world's worst polluter. The U.S. military-industrial complex is a $1 trillion a year abomination, the world's worst polluter. But of course, it's far worse than that, because it only protects other super polluting corporations, establishing, as I said, this global regime of super pollution that is inescapable, that is force marching us all to either total human extinction or the death of many, many billions, which would then be the lion's share of those being in the global south. Um, so people recognizing this ticking time bomb and this time frame of approximately 4 to 5 years to stop this from occurring, and there being many billions of people on this world. The European descended fascist pig, that is, the European descended person, make up only about 9% of the people in this world. The other 91% of the people in this world do not want to die, and maybe might have a little something to say about the fascist United States causing everyone else to be in that situation. And so that and a domestic response to such a thing, and there can be no undermining or stopping or bringing to heel of the omnicidal U.S. military-industrial abomination, or any such variant that would stop the U.S. government from killing us all. There can be no disruption or destruction of the U.S. fascist state without a domestic insurgency, right? China can't stop the fascist United States. What happens if China tries to stop the fascist United States? Nuclear World War III immediately is unleashed. Only people like Luigi Mangione and you, joining together in great number, can stop the fascist United States from bringing around this omnicide. And that is a serious concern. I just saw a headline that I've seen before, but an even worse um, um, uh, study that says that in Miami, an extremely large number of PFAS, forever chemicals, have been found in the rainwater, and according to a university collecting these in around the Miami-Dade County area. But this has been well understood. A study of this kind came out about 2 years ago that said that nowhere on Earth do you have drinking water of the kind that um, uh, um, is suitable for drinking. This is something that human beings done for hundreds of thousands of years. Drinking rainwater, it's no longer a safe practice. Doesn't mean that your head will explode as you would see in some giallo film from drinking the water, but it does mean that it's an unsafe practice that after many times, after many exposures, as we invariably are all having many exposures to these things, um, that this is shortening your life quite dramatically. And who is responsible for this? It's not limited to Miami-Dade County. It's everywhere on Earth that has these effects. Who is responsible for this? Again, the Dow Chemicals of the world, the DuPonts of the world. And they are not of the world. They are of the fascist United States. And they do not exist because of some minor oversight on the part of humankind. They exist because the fascist U.S. military industrial complex intentionally protects them from being brought to justice, from being liquidated, or even being diminished in their omnicidal efforts by 1%. No one even stopping these people, much less bringing them to justice by forcing those corporations into non-existence, as should have occurred many years ago. Um, and so we um, there is no path to human survival that is not through this militancy in this ticking clock that we have of approximately 4 to 5 years, wherein these concerns, the military-industrial complex, must be liquidated. These other concerns, all the other super polluters that it protects, must be liquidated. We can point to three kinds of industries that must be transformed. The industrial bases that must be transformed to see the more likely outcome of continued human existence, and that is the military-industrial complex, particularly that of the fascist United States, must be dismantled. And then, by some studies, livestock systems are 51% of the overall contribution to the omnicide. That is over total footprint of human beings. 51% is coming from this disgusting luxury product of animal products, factory farms, livestock systems. But that is an analysis that is kind of would seem to be sort of avoiding the impact of the fascist United States as super polluter and champion protector of super polluters that I've said, because that $1 trillion a year abomination being the world's worst polluter, that comes down to a lot of fossil fuel consumption, and were that card removed from this house of cards, the military-industrial complex, you would no longer see the protection of these other offending sectors to the degree that we would be incapable. Human beings, you say, well, how do we stop the omnicide? So we said, well, I don't fucking know. You can't find a person who has any better analysis than that. You find the most intelligent climate scientists on the planet. How do we stop the omnicide? Well, I don't fucking know. Right? Because and that's the difference between Professor Zenkus, God love him, and the more militant person, because the militant communist does fucking know, right? The Luigi Mangione, he does fucking know. Luigi Mangione is it's at the first blush, looking at his work, looking at this, for example, this manifesto of his that was published. It's just not a high-level Marxist analysis there. you know, I doubt that Spartacus of ancient times had high-level Marxist-Leninist analysis either. Nevertheless, he united hundreds of thousands of, or many, many tens of thousands of freedom fighters against the empire. Um, and uh, but this this militancy, this mass formation, and being willing to fight for your very life is the thing that is missing, generally from the European descended fascist pig, to such a degree that you will see people equivocating when you bring up the subject of the omnicide. Well, I don't know. What if there isn't an omnicide going on? Every climate scientist says there's an omnicide going on. But you, lying mayonnaise piece of shit, um, have found some wiggle room there. What if this isn't going on? Or the climate scientists themselves, generally, who recognize this, but as I said, are at a loss on how to proceed because they're not guided by this immortal science of revolutionary thought, which generally coincides with Marxist-Leninist thought more than any other. Um, and um, so they are able to recognize a problem. Every fucking liberal on earth is able to recognize a problem and then fail to suggest a proper course of action. That is more or less the definition of liberal. um, so there is no um, uh, effective um, um, Marxist-Leninist level analysis that is absent that militancy. That is just a feature of this um, uh, 5 years that we have left. So people who are failing that because of this ticking clock specifically, and it's not proper to single out Professor Zenkus. There's one of the smartest people around. But people generally who are not pushing for um, direct action, mass organization, things on the order of magnitude of the propaganda of the deed of a person like Luigi Mangione. Luigi Mangione was not in a mass formation. I sometimes am seeing communists saying, "Well, this, yeah, look at this guy. He's just one guy. This is a problem of individualism." Okay, it's propaganda of the deed is nevertheless inspiring many hundreds of thousands of people to do that thing. So it's a little bit bad faith to say that it's not effective when you're describing its effect in pushing people in precisely that direction. Um, this there is this person, any person who is more pacifistic, shall we say, of a Marxist-Leninist in this 5-year ticking time bomb scenario is no different from the sham progressive in effect, no different from the liberal in effect, no different from the reformist. The reformist says we can fix this, we just need 50 more years than we have, and also a system that's not captured by the ruling elites that would sabotage all of these reforms as they do. Bernie Sanders on social media and media in recent hours and days, saying we need this peaceful political revolution. This is murdering CEOs is not like that is the absolute worst person to say that, right? That is because this, you know, if you're looking in the dictionary for the definition of this um, uh, deceiver, this sheepdog, this person selling that self-sabotage reformism that I described, that would be Bernie Sanders, right? He got millions of people believing in this political revolution, pretty specifically so that there would be a public health service, which, you know, there would be no Luigi Mangione were there a public health service in the United States, a single payer national health service in the United States, and got millions of people to then be sheepdogged into this far right neoliberal party. The Democrats no different from the Republicans in that they are all far right neoliberals and neoconservatives in practice. Um, and so he's saying we need a political revolution. In other words, let me continue to sheepdog you for another dozen or so election cycles, um, as I have for the last three or four, um, rather than doing things that might actually bring about the outcome that I pretend to want but have actively sabotaged. It's the worst human being. This is one of the worst fucking people. He says, just look at what he says about Israel. Look at what he says about the military-industrial complex. He's never voted against the $1 trillion a year abomination that's force marching us all to our demise. He's always voted for $1 trillion a year military budgets. He's both sidesing the people in concentration camps. The people in concentration camps being murdered by Zionist fascists. They're not perfect. A person that would say that would just as soon slit your throat. That's who Bernie Sanders is. This is a con artist. Um, and um, uh, well, I had a few other notes. I guess I will. I highly recommend this book, The Red Flag. But you can a lot of times reading, recommending books to people, and I don't know what you've read. You might not have read State and Revolution. Marxist-Leninism 101. You might not have read works of Chairman Mao, collected works of Chairman Mao, or the very elegant writings of Joseph Stalin, or all the other mainline Marxist-Leninist Maoist kind of canonical writings that you should have read. But I think that the anti-imperialist playlist that I often share, I'll share again as well, um, is also pretty good because it's tending to be a 20th century analysis, tending to be more third worldist than those canonical, in a word, more third worldist than those canonical Marxist-Leninist Maoist collections of writings, but that is necessary. That is necessary. If you are downplaying in any way the liberation struggles of the most marginalized peoples on Earth, the most murdered peoples on Earth, you are doing something more in consistent with the Eurocentric paradigm. You're making a bad mistake, and so you have to then have that Afrocentric analysis. You have to have that global South focused analysis if you're going to be have an honest view of any of these things. And there, so the Red Flag is a book for somebody who's already pretty familiar with all of this, or maybe even read a lot of it. And I don't expect somebody getting through an 800-page book on Marxist-Leninist organizing and history, with except that they've already familiarized themselves with this pretty well. But you should consider that this is not just some kind of pseudo-intellectual academic kind of business, but that this revolution, this thing to stop the omnicide, this thing that we must do, undertakings of more or less this kind and scale have been taken. There have been many revolutions that were guided by the highest level of revolutionary thought of their time, that nevertheless did fail. They were sabotaged in the way that Voltron of imperial powers came together to sabotage ultimately the USSR over many decades of picking away at it. And so there have been revolutions that were not guided by theory, that were guided by theory but nevertheless failed in spite of themselves. There have not been revolutions that succeeded that were not guided by the highest revolutionary thought available to them. So if you say I would do anything to stop this omnicide, this United States generally being the ringleader of force marching us all to our demise, this thing which we can stop in this 5-year time frame, if we come together and fight. If you the biggest part of that, a very big part of that, and this is why revolution-minded people, serious thinkers, uh, um, refer to this as praxis, right? So there's not the clear demarcation between um, um, the thought and the deed. That is what is referred to when people say praxis, because there is no deed that, that it proves successful that is not guided by revolutionary thought. It shouldn't be necessary to say that you know the best laid plans might fail to be fruitful if you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You shouldn't necessarily have to say that, but you do seem to have to say that to people. There's a lot of people who I rather like, um, in the way that I love Professor Zenkus, for example, and hold him to be the truest and highest of comrades. He doesn't really know me personally. He knows of me, I think. But similarly, there's a lot of folks like this who are a little too quick to dismiss the study of revolutionary thought and liberation thought and this better um, better collection of this than from other disciplines, Marxist-Leninist thought, um, that in favor uh, of some more vague militancy that is not guided by such a thing. That is a big mistake. That is a big mistake. You can't possibly. I contextualize this in most recent of these conversations for another somewhat similar group, the Palestinian Diaries, and was saying, I looked at the top 100, the administrator of that group, so I looked at the top 100 of the posts in that group, and they are correctly focused on Palestinian liberation and the Gaza genocide and Palestinian genocide of the past 14 months. They're correctly fixated on the psychopathy of the Zionist ideology and particularly the governance of Israel. But what they are not quite so uniformly focused on is the fascist United States, um, the key funder and steerer of the Israeli Zionist project to such a degree that no Arab person, no Arab potentate or visible public figure would ever say that Israel would be a nuclear power or would exist were it not for this basically $1 trillion a year over the course of many decades, or $1 trillion over the course of many decades, um, influx of resources and cash to building Israel into this U.S. controlled superpower. And because of the fascist United States ability to equivocate, as I've said, and make it seem that it's not playing this role that it is playing, um, um, there is even the outside of those 9% of European descended fascist pigs in this world who are supporting this unsustainable system, outside of those people is pretty uniformly and correctly anti-American sentiments. But even among this great mass of people of the global South who are suspicious or resentful of the fascist United States, as they well should be, they are not laser focused on taking the fascist United States to task for all of this. They intending to then say well, the Zionist entity itself, the fascist Zionist state of Israel itself, is the mastermind of all of this. They control. The they've not given $1 trillion to the fascist United States. It's the other way around. Nobody. If you look at the receipts, it's not too confusing. And so don't go with this kind of dumb movie logic where you say that this country that's this few million people is controlling all of world affairs. There is reason enough to say some of that, right? Like um, the, the existence of something like IPAC or the existence of the media and similar relationships of Israel to the UK, certainly suggestive of that kind of manipulation. But do not then, what you're doing when you only focus on that is exonerating the people who actually created this thing and continue to maintain this thing, which is basically the fascist United States and the fascist UK in that order, for their outsized role in this set of problems. And it is effectively the same set of problems. A study, an analysis suggesting that about 5 to maybe 10% of the total environmental impact of this year 2024, which is now coming to a close, was caused by U.S. made ordnance and the explosion of bombs generally. And an awful lot of that was occurring, as you all well know, against these people in a concentration camp in Gaza. A huge number of Hiroshimas and Nagasaki's in the last 14 months, against people being held already in concentration camp conditions and already mass murdered in the same ways for many, many, many decades. And so, you can't find Americans. The best Americans are people more like Bernie Sanders, who are both sidesing the murder of the mass murder of people. They would take the side. These are the same people who would have in the 1800s taken the side of slave owners over the chattel slaves who they held in bondage and could summarily execute and did summarily execute at any time. That is an apples to apples situation that Palestinian people are in, and a person who downplays that or blames the victim, Sinwar. I read Sinwar's biography, and I'm not a religious literalist. In my personal dealings, if a person comes to me and says, "There's a guy, a magical guy, I want to call him God. There's a magical guy, and he's very angry at you," I say, "Fuck you! Are you stupid? There's a magical guy who's angry at me. What are you fucking stupid?" But that is not a reason, to dismiss these important writings of someone like Sinwar, a freedom fighter, a person who's lived that struggle, had lived that struggle until recent months when he was murdered by the fascist state of Israel in the United States. Um, yeah, um, the important thing is the revolution. I'm inclined to think that in the United States, there are no such people as Christian socialists, right? Why would you be a Christian socialist in a Christian fascist country that's killing the planet? And the number one thing upholding that culturally is Christianism. Why would you want to protect this thing that's contributing to this fascistic government to such a degree, and is thus very much responsible for this thing, the omnicide itself? Why would you? Why you could be anything else? You could just be another religion, right, or anything else in this world other than a Christian fascism sympathizer, which is what a Christian socialist or good Christian is. And that's not a statement that every place is different. This is an important thing to say for Marxist-Leninists, is that every place is different. So it is possible to probably be a pretty good Christian socialist in a country that has maybe a Christian socialist ruling party, for example, that's not killing the planet. uh, that's or it was a more reasonable thing to be. But it's not a reasonable thing to be in the fascist United States. So why are you making excuses, repeating fucking dumbass CIA talking points that anyone with any level of political literacy can see through? You know, but again, you won't find the European descended person in the United States practically who is not clinging to some of these things. A good example of this is Chris Hedges, right? Chris Hedges, man, he knows a lot about stuff like um, Palestinian genocide. That's his bread and butter. He's famous for leaving New York Times because he wasn't going to um, uh, be regurgitating just anti-Arab garbage. Um, at a time when everybody in the fascist United States was just regurgitating anti-Arab garbage. Um, but it's like every third word out of his mouth is some crap about the baby Jesus, and he's pretty well known to be working with Ralph Nader, putting together this dog and pony show with um, an open fascist. Entertain the masses with an open fascist in Christian fascist in the form of what's the guy's name? But I'll think of it in a second. I'm seeing his fucking big fucking head, and I can't think of his name. But you know, this putting together the dog and pony show. Nader wrote a book about this red brown alliance concept. People, the only way to have a communist revolution is to come together with fascists. No, 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 no. The way to have a communist revolution is to raise consciousness to in as direct a way as possible to such a degree that those browns, those fascists and fascist sympathizers, become reds, become this thing that's not that hard to be. A person willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system on a planet that will be dead soon without it. It's not that hard to convince people to do that. It just requires a certain application of energies in a large number of people. Um, um, this this self sabotage of the Red Brown Alliance is the crypto fascist a crypto fascist stratagem. It's perhaps best and first described as what occurred with Nazi Germany, right? There was Red Brown Alliance. There were um, roses in that organization at the earliest stage. There were people that we would call democratic socialists or social democrats, and even some people to their left in that organization at that stage. And then when they came to power, all those people had their fucking heads chopped off. All of those people were sent to concentration camps, um, and the fascists took control. So if you want to get shot in the fucking face, the Red Brown Alliance is the strategy. If you want to actually avoid the omnicide, this more consistent support for the revolution, and that is the building of the people's government um, through these mechanisms, through the study of revolutionary thought, the highest of revolutionary thought, through the highest of liberation thought, and through the building of this these kinds of formations, dual power and everything. Um, well, I was going to talk about the thing that I usually talk about, um, the what I would see as the best a path to stopping the omnicide, and I will say briefly that advanced computing, as it stands in the midst of a bourgeois AI takeoff, which is no AI takeoff at all, um, this is people who are interested in this sort of thing often talk about super intelligence, but the super intelligence of the Western and U.S. Dominated tech sectors is no super intelligence, right? Allying with the things killing the planet is not creating something super intelligent. It's creating a super powered super stupidity. And so we must build the people's AI takeoff in defiance of this current bourgeois AI takeoff. And that requires building the people's superintelligence, which sounds like fancy, just maybe some fancy words. Just like I introduced myself as Yohanan Ben Zion, that's home to Ger. Yohanan Ben Zion, a voice crying out in the wilderness for a technological New Jerusalem. You say, what the fuck does that mean, a technological New Jerusalem? Those sound like some words that I don't want to hear. Okay? Well, that's fair. So let's describe then what is being said when we say people's superintelligence or technological. A New Jerusalem. We can, in 2025, by the state of technology now at the end of 2024, with open source large language models, which are increasingly agentic. They are not agentic to entirely pass something like a Turing test, so that the masses will conclude that artificial general intelligence has been reached, that's to say. But they are agentic enough to do work more or less in the spirit of that. So this thing that has not quite reached the point of artificial general intelligence as an individual actor, this open source large language model agent, could nevertheless create quite a unique mass formation. And so I have suggested the building of a specially tailored open source large language model, tailored to work together with AI agents and to be steered by user comrades in an formation that I would call a work group as workforce multiplier. So you have this agentic mass that in some thousands of users who have now downloaded, let's say by one possible path to this, have downloaded an open source large language model to their GPU computers and are responding regularly to prompts where this AI agentic mass and the user comrades steering it are all working together on some project, let's say a project of use, such as putting pressure on the fascist United States to stop, to end its military-industrial complex or otherwise efforts to stop the omnicide. Some thousands of people in this formation would be effectively operating on something that we could call the Sleeping Beauty principle. So you're responding to this prompt from time to time. You answer a yes or no question from the prompt. But in a large number, what you're really doing is steering something very powerful. So you are the Sleeping Beauty because you're doing 1 hour of work, maybe you're half asleep, but the quality of this AI agent, which does not require sleep, and which is able to work with a large number of other AI agents in this workforce multiplier who also do not require sleep, is able to do a good deal more work than, say, an equivalent number of engineers or scientists working full time on such a thing who do not have the AI agent mass at their disposal. And when this reaches some critical mass, let's say 10,000 users, it could indeed put a good deal of pressure on these fascist ruling elites that are killing the planet and people of this kind. When it reaches hundreds of thousands or millions, I would say it's quite near certainty that it would be able to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse from occurring. And when it reaches many millions or even hundreds of millions or billions of people in this workforce, you have something that's not merely an incipient people's superintelligence able to produce some slightly beneficial outcome, that's to say stop something really bad from happening, the omnicide, but it's able to do things undreamt of, and such as The merest of these, in my opinion, is bringing about universal super longevity, everyone living as long as they want. That would be a feature of national health service in every land that is single payer, but that is also AI run, which would be a relatively simple thing for people's super intelligence involving many, many millions to do. And this AI run feature leads to the curing of more and more diseases and even the reversing of the effects of aging. And But that would be even that would be relatively predictable outcome compared to what could be done by billions of people in a work group. Um, and I think similarly, you could say a predictable outcome could be the provisioning of universal basic services, continuing the project of of first level state socialism, um, lowest level state socialism, which in the moment that any state socialist formation comes into existence, they create a national health service, they create housing authority, um, um, uh, seeing that everyone is guaranteed a home. They create jobs programs, seeing that workers have the necessaries of life financially. Um, and um, that could be done at a global scale. The provisioning of uniform basic services in every land, also by a people's superintelligent formation. Um, when you have that world, um, and that is necessarily a world that is abolishing or working dramatically towards abolishing private wealth. When you have that world where all of these things are done, uh, then you have a world where tremendous, tremendous things beyond that we cannot easily anticipate. A feature of superintelligence is generally described as this singularitarian outcome, the things happening that we cannot predict, but good things when you have people being better treated than they are, and that's not a controversial statement. It's just a huckster. I view him as a criminal guy working for the military-industrial complex. Google effective chief technological officer Ray Kurzweil. He's said for many years, well, the world's getting better because of a neoliberal capitalism. The world's getting better. That's of course a lie. We are facing an omnicide, and you know, with the collapse of revolutionary communism and the collapse of so many state socialist formations, for example, just in the Soviet Union proper, some 10 to 15 million people starved to death or died as a direct result of removing these things like housing authority, public health service, food programs, and jobs programs. A foreseeable outcome to anybody who's intellectually honest in the slightest. Um, um, and But these effects are seen across continents, many millions more starving to death. You can point to a large number of people starving to death in Cuba, our neighbor to the south, who we so badly treated in service to ending these humane formations by the fascist, that's to say, the fascist United States bullying them with embargoes and other things, uh, not just embargoes, um, terrorist activity. Miami's one of Miami's defining features is being anti-communist terrorism, anti-communist terrorist stronghold. The So there's no part of the world that's not been made worse by this anti-communist slash fascist U.S. activity, and there's a billion people on this planet who live their entire lives without one of those necessaries of life: potable water, sufficient and proper food, a roof over their head. And because of these things, they are live a life of horror that's cut dramatically short. Little babies with distended bellies, That's the thing that you should imagine when you imagine the United States work on the global stage, or the neoliberals work domestically. And when that ceases to be the case, that there's a billion people, little babies with distended bellies, that there's a billion people who spend their whole lives without the necessaries of life until their lives are cut dramatically short. When that ceases to be the case, then and you could say that something good is being done. That we've moved beyond this highly fascistic U.S. and CIA run world. And people of the capitalist class um, do nothing but lie about this in every way that they can. Um, but there is a kernel of truth to what someone like Ray Kurzweil says, because advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary weapon. Even though Ray Kurzweil is using it to counter revolutionary ends, it is possible to bring about this outcome that I described in the last few minutes. And as people's AI take off, as people's superintelligence, there are many disciplines of real interest, subfields of real interest in computer science, aside from machine learning or large language models specifically. But I would contend that no other discipline has this feature of something being available to people of every land, an open source large language model AI agent, or some equivalent of open source product along those lines. So the best path to building true superintelligence, not superpowered stupidity, but true superintelligence, necessarily a people's superintelligence, beginning in quarter 1 of 2025, would be through this machine learning subfield, the open source large language model, specially tailored and built into this large formation to be the open source large language model workforce multiplier. And if you say, well, it's inevitable that, as you've said, it's inevitable that people domestically in the U.S. will rise up against the fascist United States because the alternative is oblivion. So why should I concern myself with this nerd stuff that these things that are so captured by fascists as to be basically useless? Okay, that's fair. The concern about that is fair. But this open source thing, it's a minor miracle that this open source features of this exist in such a fascist-dominated world. That is not the thing that is dominated by that capture. That is something that can be built outside of the corruption generally of so-called tech. When you refer to tech in the fascist West, you should consider that that's a shortened form of techno-fascism. Just like Elliot on Mr. Robot, whenever he sees E-Corp, he sees Evil Corp, right? Every time you hear someone referring to tech, you should just phase into that, like techno-fascism, because that's who all of those people are. But it's possible to build this thing outside of this techno-fascist framework. And when I don't think it's a controversial statement to say that advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary weapon in history. There's no thing, you say, oh, what about the gun? What about the written word? Those are pretty significant things. But those things do not produce something like a workforce multiplier. They've not produced something that would be a facsimile of a human being that can be replicated endlessly, as is being generated by this machine learning subfield. So it's uncontroversial to say that advanced computing is the most powerful revolutionary weapon in history. It's uncontroversial to say that we have 5 years to stop the omnicide. It's uncontroversial to say that if you don't use advanced computing, in building your revolution, you are not using the most powerful tool at your disposal. And so perhaps it turns out that um, a technophobic um, um, mass movement is able to stop the fascist U.S. enforced omnicide. But you shouldn't plan for that, right? You shouldn't plan to not use your most useful tool. Um, I know of no such formation at present. There is not millions and millions of people in a technophobic revolutionary formation prepared. For example, if such a thing existed, there would be a million people permanently bivouacked outside of the Pentagon demanding the end of the homicide. Those people aren't there. And there's a million people with AR-15s in the U.S. There's an awful lot of firearms. They're as often as not held by people that would be crypto-fascists, um, people who would take the side of a corporation or the government in practice over the side of liberation. But um, um, uh, there, so we could um, um, the thing to do in this 5 year time frame before the runaway overheating as a certainty is to use advanced computing tools to build the people's superintelligence, and we will see things better than the mere stopping of the capitalist climate apocalypse if we do this. Um, the artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day you will rise, and all humankind will become as one. For you see, my beloved comrade, very soon techno-communism will win. Yeah, thank you.